There comes a point, usually somewhere after 50, when you realize that peace isn't something you stumble into. It's something you choose moment by moment, person by person, conversation by conversation. And often the peace you're craving isn't found in a better routine or a quieter house. It's found in not answering. Not just letting go of arguments, but letting go of the need to explain yourself to people who have already made up their minds. You've been there. A relative who twists your every word. A coworker who turns every discussion into a debate. A friend who always needs to win even when there's nothing at stake. And afterward, you're left replaying the conversation, carrying a strange weight that has nothing to do with what was said and everything to do with how it left you feeling. Exhausted, disconnected, maybe even a little defeated. So let's be honest, not every disagreement is worth your voice. Not every person deserves your explanation. And not everyone you love is healthy to engage with when your peace is on the line. This isn't about walking away from relationships. It's about learning to walk away from patterns that no longer serve you. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. In this video, we'll walk through 9 kinds of people you should stop arguing with after midlife, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. Because the truth is, protecting your energy is no longer optional. You've lived too much, given too much, and learned too much to keep spending yourself on conversations that lead nowhere. If you're ready to reclaim the quiet strength that comes with maturity, stay with me. Let's begin with the first kind of person who no longer deserves your breath. Number 1, the image-obsessed. They live for applause, not truth. There's a kind of person you meet in life, not once but many times. You spot them at family gatherings, in boardrooms, at church, or even among your closest friends. They're not always loud, not always boastful, but everything they say, everything they do carries one unspoken question. How do I look? Not in terms of clothing or style, but image, status, reputation, control of the narrative. They live for applause. And if truth threatens that applause, even by an inch, they will quietly choose image over honesty every single time. At first, you don't notice it. They may seem charming, even generous. They tell stories with themselves as the hero. They're quick to recall moments where they were the savior, the wise one, the person everyone admired. But over time, something starts to feel off. When others succeed, they go quiet. When they're corrected, even gently, their smile tightens. When someone else gets attention, they interrupt, redirect, shift the spotlight back onto themselves. And if you ever, even by accident, say something that makes them feel small in front of others, the warmth drains from the room, replaced by something colder, quieter, more dangerous. See, people who are obsessed with image rarely raise their voice. They don't need to. They remember. They replay what you said. They think about how it made them look. And even if everything seems fine on the surface, deep down, they've already marked you. You embarrassed them. You made them feel vulnerable. And in their world, that's something they can't forgive. You might notice a subtle shift. They stop including you in conversations. They leave you out of small plans. They no longer ask how you're doing. And yet when others are around, they act the same, smiling, kind, perfectly composed. That's what makes it so confusing. You start to question yourself. Did I do something wrong? Am I being too sensitive? But deep down, you know, you touch something sacred to them, their pride. The danger in arguing with image-obsessed people isn't the fight itself, it's the quiet aftermath. Because they don't argue to understand, they don't ask questions to connect. They aren't looking for resolution. They're playing a long game. They'll hold a grudge and they'll never tell you they're holding it. And slowly, you become the outsider in a space where you once felt safe. So what can you do? You don't need to confront them. You don't need to apologize for speaking your truth, especially if it wasn't cruel or careless. But you do need to stop trying to fix the connection. Because when someone values their image more than they value authenticity, any real closeness will always be conditional. They'll be kind as long as you never make them uncomfortable. They'll be warm as long as you never shine too brightly. They'll be present, but only if they're in control of how they are seen. And that right there is the trap. If you start changing yourself just to stay in their good graces, toning down your truth, softening your joy, walking on eggshells. You'll wake up one day and realize you've gone quiet in your own life. You've shrunk yourself to fit their fragile comfort. And for what? A relationship where you're never fully seen, only managed. There's a moment many women reach in their 50s or 60s, sometimes earlier, sometimes later, when we look back at all the time we spent trying to preserve relationships by staying small. And we realize that was never peace. That was performance, and we're too old to keep performing. Let them have their applause. Let them win the moment. If their pride needs to be fed and you feeding it costs you nothing, go ahead. But don't hand over your voice. Don't argue with someone who isn't listening. Don't try to explain your heart to someone who only hears through the filter of their ego. Because here's what's true. Some people don't want connection. They want control. And the minute you become a mirror that reflects something they don't want to see, they'll shatter the glass and blame you for the mess. Protect your peace. Speak with grace. But if someone makes you feel like your honesty is a threat to them, you don't need to change your words. You need to change your distance. Kindness isn't silence, but wisdom. Wisdom knows when silence says more than words ever could. Number 2, the suspicious mind, always assuming the worst. You can feel it the moment it happens. You say something simple, harmless, even kind, and the air shifts. Their eyes narrow just slightly, their tone gets tighter, and suddenly you're no longer having a conversation. You're being interpreted. Every word you say is held up to the light and twisted into a question. What did they mean by that? There are people in this world, maybe in your family, your circle of friends, even your own home, who live in a constant state of defense. They don't hear what you say. They hear what they fear you might be saying, and that fear shapes everything. It distorts your intentions, rewrites your words, and builds an invisible wall between you and them, brick by brick, assumption by assumption. At first, you try to explain yourself. No, I didn't mean it that way. I was just asking a question. I wasn't implying anything. But the more you explain, the deeper the suspicion seems to grow. It's as if clarity only makes them more convinced that you're hiding something. So you walk away wondering, why do I feel like I've just been interrogated for a crime I didn't commit? The answer is simple but hard to swallow. Suspicious minds don't want to be reassured. They want to be right about being wronged. They're not listening to understand you. They're listening to confirm their fear. And that fear isn't really about you. It's about them. Somewhere in their past, someone hurt them, betrayed them, dismissed them. And now everyone is guilty until proven innocent. And sadly, even innocence isn't enough. Living with or loving someone like this takes an emotional toll that's hard to measure. You begin editing yourself, avoiding certain words, steering clear of topics, softening your tone until your voice barely feels like yours anymore. You walk on eggshells, not because you've done anything wrong, but because they are always preparing to be hurt. And you're the one paying for someone else's damage. It's exhausting, not because you don't care, but because caring doesn't help. In fact, the more you try to show you care, the more suspicious they become. Why are you being so nice? What are you trying to get from me? It's like trying to pour clean water into a cracked glass. It keeps leaking no matter how much you give. And here's where the real heartbreak comes in. You might genuinely love this person. You might want to fix it, to hold the space, to prove over and over that you're not a threat. But trying to earn the trust of someone who refuses to trust isn't noble. It's a slow erosion of self. One day you'll wake up and realize you've lost your light trying to warm someone who was never ready to feel it. So what do? You don't argue. You don't try to convince. You stop carrying the burden of their healing. Their suspicion is not your responsibility. Your job is not to soften every edge of life so they don't feel triggered. Your job is to live honestly, kindly, and clearly, and let that be enough. And if it isn't enough for them, that's not a reflection of your failure. That's a sign of their wound. Set boundaries, not walls, but clear lines that protect your peace. Speak simply, but not apologetically. When they twist your words, don't get tangled trying to untwist them. Let time and consistency speak louder than your explanations ever could. Because people who are truly ready to see the good in you will see it. And those who aren't, no amount of proving will change their lens. It doesn't mean you stop loving them. It just means you stop shrinking. You stop explaining yourself into the ground. You stop giving away your peace like it's something they are entitled to. And most importantly, you stop mistaking their suspicion for something you have to solve. You can love someone and still take a step back. You can care deeply and still protect yourself. You can say, "I see your pain, but I will not let it become my prison." Because in the end, relationships that require you to constantly defend your goodness will wear down even the strongest heart. And your heart, it wasn't made to be questioned every day. It was made to be seen, heard, and held with care. So let the suspicious keep their doubts. Let them wrestle with shadows. But you live in the light of what's true. You don't need to explain kindness. You just need to embody it. And anyone who can't receive that isn't ready to walk beside you. Number 3, the unmoving, stuck in beliefs that no longer fit. You probably already know someone like this. You've had the conversation, maybe more than once. You bring a fresh thought, a new perspective, maybe even something you've learned through experience. But before the words even land, they're already shaking their head. That's not how things work. We've always done it this way. Why change what's not broken? And just like that, the door shuts. They're not interested in listening, not really. Because in their world, growth is threatening. New ideas feel like personal attacks. Change feels like admitting they were wrong, so instead they dig in deeper. They hold tight to beliefs that no longer serve anyone, clinging not because they still believe, but because they are afraid to admit those beliefs no longer fit the life they are living. You might be tempted to push harder, to present facts, evidence, logic, thinking if you just explain it clearly enough, they'll get it. But they won't. Because it's not about understanding, it's about control. And the more right you are, the more threatened they feel. That's why even when your voice is calm, your heart sincere, and your words well-meant, they still respond with resistance, sarcasm, or silence. And that silence, it's not peace, it's a wall. People like this often mistake stillness for strength. They think being unshaken is a virtue, but what they are really doing is standing in the same spot long after the world has changed around them. They haven't evolved, not because they can't, but because they won't. Because growing would mean shedding an old identity, admitting they didn't always know best, and letting go of the comfort of being right. You may love someone like this deeply. Maybe it's a parent, a sibling, a partner, a longtime friend, and you've tried again and again to help them see that holding onto outdated beliefs is keeping them stuck, isolated, and often in quiet pain. But they can't hear you. Not because your words aren't true, but because truth only lands in soil that's ready, and they're still cement. Here's the emotional cost. The more you try to change their mind, the more you start questioning your own. You'll feel yourself pulling back in conversations, holding in your joy, avoiding what you really think just to keep the peace. But that peace isn't real. It's just your silence wrapped in their comfort. So let me say this gently but clearly. It's not your job to awaken someone who's determined to stay asleep. You are not the messenger they've been waiting for. And no matter how much you love them, no matter how much you want to help, your energy is not meant to be spent arguing with someone who's chosen stagnation over self-awareness. What can you do instead? Respect the distance. Let them sit where they've chosen to stay. Nod when they need to feel heard. Smile when the moment calls for grace, but protect the parts of yourself that still want to grow. Because if you're not careful, staying close to someone unmoving will slowly harden you too. You were not made to stand still. You were not meant to shrink yourself to fit someone else's comfort zone. You've learned too much, lived through too much, and come too far to stay silent around people who mistake certainty for wisdom. Growth takes courage, and courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like walking away from a conversation you've had too many times with someone who never truly listened. Think of it like this. Trying to plant a garden on concrete doesn't make you a better gardener. It just wastes your seeds. And your words, your insights, your vision, those are seeds. Save them for the people who are ready to receive. You'll feel the difference. They won't flinch when you share your truth. They won't take it personally when you grow. They won't treat your evolution like a betrayal. They'll lean in, not lean back. And for those who don't, let them be. Let them sit in what's familiar. You don't need to fix them. You don't need to follow them. You just need to keep growing. because at this stage in life, you don't have time for circular conversations. You don't have energy to burn convincing someone who isn't open. You don't need to be dragged back into old patterns just to keep the peace. Sometimes the wisest thing you can do is take a deep breath, offer a soft goodbye, not out loud, but in your heart, and keep walking, quietly, peacefully, forward. Number 4, the jealous, dressed in sarcasm and fake smiles. Jealousy doesn't always wear a scowl. Sometimes it wears a smile. It claps when you succeed, but the sound rings hollow. It compliments your growth, but something in the tone feels sharp. You hear it in the pause before the praise. You feel it in the sideways glance when you're recognized, or in the awkward silence that follows your good news. It's subtle, but it's there. And the moment you notice it, you can't unsee it. You may think they're just being sarcastic. Maybe they didn't mean it like that. But part of you knows they didn't forget to congratulate you. They chose not to. They didn't tease you because they're close. They did it because they are uncomfortable with how far you've come. You've walked through things they haven't. You've grown in places they've stayed still. And your light now shines in spaces where they still feel dim. That doesn't make you arrogant. That doesn't make them evil. It simply makes the relationship imbalanced. What's hard about dealing with jealousy is that it rarely announces itself. Envy is polite on the surface. It shows up as backhanded compliments, passive-aggressive jokes, and well-timed silence. The people who envy you the most often insist they're just being real. But what they are really doing is minimizing your joy to soothe their own discomfort. And if you're not careful, you'll start shrinking, not because you're not proud, but because you're tired of dodging their sharp edges disguised as humor. You may think you can explain your way through it. I worked hard for this. It wasn't luck. I didn't change, I just grew. But jealousy isn't logical. It doesn't want your explanation. It wants your light dimmed just enough to make insecure people feel safe again. And no matter how gently you try to share your wins, they'll twist them into weapons against you or behind your back. Maybe you've noticed it with a sibling who suddenly becomes distant, or a longtime friend who once celebrated everything with you, but now can't even look you in the eye. Maybe it's the coworker who used to laugh with you, but now seems to find something wrong in everything you say. And maybe, just maybe, you've started to wonder, am I being too much? Should I tone it down? The answer is no, you're not too much. You're just standing in the light now, and not everyone's eyes are ready for it. The truth is, jealousy has nothing to do with you and everything to do with what they haven't healed in themselves. You didn't take their opportunities. You didn't make them feel small. You simply grew. You simply became. And instead of doing the same, they chose to project their discomfort onto you. So what do? You don't confront them, not unless it's truly necessary. Most of the time, jealousy doesn't respond well to confrontation. It responds with denial, deflection, or defensiveness. Instead, you step back, not out of spite, but out of protection. You guard your peace by refusing to explain, justify, or prove that your joy is deserved, because it is, and anyone who can't hold space for that is not someone you need to keep close. You can still be kind, still be respectful, still wish them well. But you do it from a distance that protects your light. Because here's what happens when you keep trying to earn their support. You begin to believe you need their permission to shine. And before long, you're downplaying your blessings, hiding your wins, editing your joy just to avoid making someone else uncomfortable. That's not humility. That's self-abandonment. And you've come too far to go back to that. Jealousy can't survive in open, honest relationships. It feeds on comparison, secrecy, and small talk laced with resentment. So if a relationship constantly leaves you second-guessing your worth, it's not loving, it's draining. And it's okay to walk away from that. You don't owe anyone your dimmed-down version. You don't need to wear shame just because someone else hasn't done their healing. You've earned your light. You've earned your calm. You've earned your smile. And there's nothing arrogant about standing in that truth quietly, confidently, without apology. So let them whisper, let them question, let them wrestle with their shadows, but you don't lose yourself trying to soothe someone else's silence. You can love people without shrinking for them. You can be compassionate without making yourself small. And you can wish them healing while choosing your own peace. Because at this point in life, you know this, your joy is not a threat, and the right people will never make you feel like it is. Number 5, the transactional kindness only if it pays. At first, they seem generous, helpful, even thoughtful. They offer their time, lend a hand, check in often. It feels good, comforting even. You tell yourself, this is someone I can count on. But over time, something shifts. Their kindness starts to come with conditions. Their help feels calculated, and you begin to realize this isn't connection. This is a transaction. You may not notice it right away, because transactional people are rarely obvious. They don't say, I'll do this for you if you do something for me. No, it's subtler than that. They keep score. They remind you of what they've done, usually when they want something in return. They offer help, but they expect access. They show up with a smile, but the cost comes later in the form of guilt, obligation, or unspoken expectations. You ask yourself, did I owe them something? Was that favor really a favor, or was it an investment? That's how you know. When kindness feels like a currency, not a gift, that's a transactional relationship. These people don't just measure generosity, they measure everything. Every word, every gesture, every silence. If they are nice, it's because it gets them something. If they are quiet, it's because they're waiting to see what they can gain. Their world is built around leverage, not love, not mutual care. Just strategy. And here's the hardest part, you don't see it until you stop giving. The moment you say no, the moment you stop making the effort, you feel it. The warmth disappears, the calls stop, the tone shifts. Suddenly you're ungrateful, you're selfish, you're cold. But really, you're just no longer useful, and that's when the truth hits. You were never really seen, only used. The emotional toll of this dynamic is heavy. You start questioning your own boundaries. You feel guilty for saying no, even when it's reasonable. You bend, stretch, rearrange your time and energy just to keep the peace. And all the while, you wonder, why do I feel so unseen in a relationship where I give so much? Because giving doesn't always create connection. Not when the person on the other end sees your care as their entitlement. Not when kindness becomes a debt they expect to collect on. It's tempting to try harder, to think, maybe if I give a little more, they'll soften. But transactional people don't soften, they adapt. If you give more, they'll take more. If you stay quiet, they'll assume you're comfortable. If you try to set limits, they'll guilt you into silence. And by the time you realize you're depleted, you're deep in a pattern that no longer serves you. So how do you break free? You start by naming it. You stop pretending it's a one-time thing or just the way they are. You acknowledge what you feel, that this relationship feels conditional, unequal, emotionally expensive. Then you reset the terms, not out loud, not with anger, but with action. You stop offering your time just to keep them happy. You stop apologizing for being tired. You stop saying yes when your heart is saying no. And when the silence comes, because it often will, you don't chase it. You don't try to fix what only worked when you were overgiving. You let the space reveal the truth. And if that truth is this, they were only close when it was convenient, then you grieve that. You grieve what you hoped it was, and you make room for what it could be with people who don't keep score. Because real love, real friendship, real connection, it doesn't demand a return on investment. It gives because it wants to. It supports without strings. It sees your no and still stays. It shows up not for what you can do, but for who you are. You deserve relationships like that, ones where your presence is enough, where your joy isn't measured by how much you offer, where your rest is respected, where your boundaries aren't punished but honored. So to the ones who only show up when there's something to gain, let them go, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Let them trade favors elsewhere. You're not a reward for good behavior. You're not a means to an end. You're a human being with depth, with value, with dignity. And you're allowed to stop performing for love that should have been unconditional all along. Number 6, the ones on a different frequency. You start speaking not to impress, just to share something real. A thought, a moment, a piece of yourself you've carried quietly for years, and somewhere in the middle of that sentence you realize they're not listening to understand. They're listening to respond, or worse, to dismiss. They smile politely, glance at their phone, or shift the subject entirely. and you're left sitting there a little quieter than before. There's a unique kind of loneliness that comes not from being alone, but from being around people who just don't get you. Not because you're complicated, but because you're simply no longer standing on the same ground. You're living from a place of reflection. They're still reacting from habit. You're trying to build peace. They're chasing noise, and the gap between you isn't just emotional, it's energetic. This isn't about intelligence or education or age. It's about consciousness, about how awake someone is to their own patterns, their own wounds, their own capacity to grow. You've spent years learning, softening, shedding parts of yourself that were performative or defensive. You've stopped rushing to prove yourself. You've started asking deeper questions. But when you bring that to the table, they laugh, or shrug, or say things like, "That's a bit much, don't you think?" It's not malicious, it's just mismatched. You're speaking from a deeper place, and they haven't arrived there yet. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But what matters is this: it's not your job to slow down your evolution just to make someone else more comfortable. Still, the temptation is strong. You want to stay connected. You want to keep the peace. So you begin translating yourself into a version they'll accept. You dull your language, hide your spiritual growth, avoid talking about what matters most. And after a while, you start to feel invisible even to yourself. That's the cost of staying too long in conversations that no longer hold your soul. You begin to second-guess your journey. You wonder, am I being too deep, too sensitive, too out there? But let me tell you the truth gently, you're not too much. You're just no longer in the shallow end, and not everyone is ready to swim with you in deeper water. This kind of disconnect can show up anywhere, in a marriage, a friendship, even a parent-child relationship. And it hurts, because you remember when you used to laugh together, dream together, feel close. You think, if we loved each other once, why do we feel so far apart now? The answer is layered but simple. Sometimes we grow in different directions, and emotional closeness without energetic alignment starts to feel hollow. So what do you do when you realize someone you care about no longer speaks your language? You stop arguing with their limitations. You stop begging for connection where resonance doesn't exist. And you stop trying to translate your soul into a dialect that was never meant to hold it. Instead, you honor where you are. You speak truthfully, even if it's only to yourself. You allow the silence after your words to say more than the misunderstanding that might follow. And you stop apologizing for needing depth, clarity, emotional presence, or spiritual honesty. This doesn't mean you cut everyone off. It means you let the relationship adjust to reality. Maybe it shifts into something simpler, quieter, less central in your life. Maybe you see them less often, talk about lighter things, stop expecting depth from someone who isn't wired for it. And that's okay. Not every connection has to be soul deep. But you deserve to spend more time with people who are. People who nod, not out of politeness, but because they feel what you're saying. People who sit in silence with you because they know some truths don't need words. People who hear your growth, your softness, your convictions, and say, "Yes, I know that place too." If those people aren't in your life yet, don't lose heart. Keep walking your path. Keep speaking in your frequency. The ones who are meant to walk with you will find you. They'll hear something in your voice that sounds like home. And when they do, you won't have to shrink or explain or filter. You'll just be, and that will be more than enough. So to those still living on old frequencies, let them be. Let them feel safe in their noise. Let them laugh at what they don't yet understand. And you keep rising, keep softening, keep tuning your life to the quiet, deep hum of truth. Because peace doesn't always come from being surrounded. Sometimes it comes from being aligned. Number 7, the willfully blind. You can't unsee it once you've seen it. The pattern, the truth, the consequence. You connect the dots, you watch the behavior, you feel the shift, and something inside you clicks. This isn't healthy. This isn't honest. This is hurting them and it's hurting me. So you speak up, gently, honestly, maybe even bravely, and what do you get in return? Denial, deflection, dismissal, because some people don't want to see. Not because they can't, but because they won't. This is what it feels like to love someone who lives in willful blindness. They're not lacking the information. They're not uneducated or unaware. They just refuse to look at what's obvious because acknowledging the truth would require change, accountability, growth, and for them that's too threatening. So instead of reflecting, they reject. They say things like, "You're too sensitive. You're making things up. That's just your opinion." They turn your clarity into confusion, your compassion into conflict. And suddenly, you're the problem for daring to point out what's right in front of them. It's infuriating, it's heartbreaking, and worst of all, it's exhausting because you find yourself trying harder, explaining the same thing in softer words, pulling back, then leaning in again. You think, if I just say it differently, or maybe if I give them time. But willful blindness isn't cured by patience, it's fueled by it. The longer you accommodate it, the deeper it grows. And here's the danger. When you stay too long in relationship with someone who refuses to face truth, you begin to doubt your own. You begin to wonder, am I overreacting? Maybe I'm the one who needs to change. That's what emotional gaslighting looks like when it's wrapped in love. It makes you question what you know. Let's be clear, willful blindness isn't ignorance. Ignorance means you haven't learned yet. Blindness means you've chosen not to. And when someone consistently chooses not to see, they're also choosing not to change, not to take responsibility, not to grow, and not to fully love, because real love requires seeing clearly. You can't build anything deep with someone who won't look at their own reflection. You'll end up carrying the emotional weight for both of you, managing the relationship, making excuses, tiptoeing around hard truths. You'll silence your intuition just to keep things okay. But okay isn't the goal. Integrity is. So what do? You stop trying to teach what someone refuses to learn. You stop pleading with their better self when they've buried it too deep. And most of all, you stop believing it's your job to wake them up. It's not. Your job is to live in clarity, to protect your peace, to keep your eyes open even if theirs stay shut. Because once you see clearly, pretending you don't just to keep someone close, that's a kind of self-abandonment, and you've outgrown that. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care with boundaries, you engage with limits, you offer compassion without compromising your clarity. If they want to stay blind, that's their path. But you walk in the light. You stop explaining the same thing over and over. You let their denial speak for itself. You leave the door open for change, but you don't wait by it. Because some people only learn when life breaks what they refuse to see. And when that day comes, they'll either face it or they'll retreat deeper into blame. Either way, it's not on you. The truth is, clarity is a lonely road at times. You'll lose people not because you were cruel, but because you were clear. And clarity makes the blind uncomfortable. But stay the course, because you will find others who see as you do, who value truth over image, growth over comfort, integrity over illusion. And when you meet them, you'll feel it, the ease, the alignment, the safety of not having to explain what should be obvious. So let the willfully blind stay where they are if they must. Let them protect their illusions. Let them tell their stories, but don't lose yourself trying to fit into a world that asks you to unsee what you know. You are not here to force anyone awake. You are here to live fully awake yourself. That is more than enough. Number 8, the competitive conversationalist. Some people don't talk to connect, they talk to compete. They listen just long enough to interrupt. They nod while secretly crafting their comeback. And when you speak, whether you're sharing joy, pain, insight, or just a thought, you can feel it, the tension, the unspoken challenge, the need to one-up, outsmart, outshine. You could be saying something gentle, thoughtful, vulnerable, but instead of leaning in with empathy, they respond with a story of their own. Bigger, better, louder. You mention a difficult week, they've had a worse one. You share a small win, they had a bigger one. You speak from the heart, they come back with logic, arguments, or thinly veiled condescension. At first it's subtle. You think, maybe they just misunderstood me. Maybe I'm being too sensitive. But over time, a pattern emerges. Conversations with them leave you feeling small, drained, or strangely silenced, like you're constantly in a debate you never signed up for. That's the thing about competitive conversationalists. They're not always loud. Some are polished, articulate, even charming. But underneath, everything is a scoreboard. Every interaction is a subtle battle, and being right matters more to them than being kind. This type of energy is exhausting, especially when you're someone who just wants peace. You're not trying to prove anything. You're just trying to share space. Speak honestly, be heard. But with them, your softness is mistaken for weakness. Your silence is seen as surrender, and any effort to express yourself becomes an invitation to defend yourself. Over time, this starts to chip away at your spirit. You stop bringing up certain topics. You censor your joy. You avoid conversations altogether, not because you don't have anything to say, but because you've learned it's not worth the emotional cost. And that's where the damage happens, not in the big blow-ups, but in the quiet retreat of your authentic voice. You may care about this person deeply. Maybe they are family. Maybe they are a friend. Maybe you've known them for years, but no matter how long you've shared history, if every conversation feels like a competition, the connection is already compromised. So how do you handle it? You stop playing their game. You stop treating every comment like it requires a response. You stop explaining your choices to someone who only wants to critique them. You stop trying to win a conversation that was never meant to be a battle. Because the truth is, you don't need to win, you need to protect your peace. This doesn't mean you become passive. It means you become discerning. You know when to speak, when to pause, and when to simply smile and disengage, not because you're giving up, but because you've grown up. You've learned that not every thought needs to be challenged, not every feeling needs to be justified, and not every person is safe to be open with. Let them have the last word. Let them believe they are right. Let them tell their story louder. Because sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is step out of the ring and refuse to fight. The beauty of midlife is that you no longer feel the need to explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You don't have to keep proving you're thoughtful, spiritual, or capable. You've already proven it to yourself. And anyone who tries to pull you back into the drama of constant comparison is not someone who values connection. They value control. And the more you engage, the more you fuel that cycle. So give yourself permission to opt out, not with bitterness, not with superiority, but with wisdom. When they try to bait you into debate, breathe instead of bite. When they push, soften. When they interrupt, pause. When they twist your words, let silence be your punctuation. Because peace isn't won by overpowering, it's preserved by refusing to participate. Eventually, you'll realize something freeing. The people who truly see you, who love you, not your arguments, never make you feel like you're in a contest. They don't measure your words, they receive them, they don't rush to respond. They sit with you, they mirror your depth, and they make space for your spirit. That's the kind of connection you deserve. One that doesn't ask you to compete, just to show up as you are. So to the ones who turn every conversation into a race, let them run. You have nothing to prove. You've already arrived. Number 9, the emotional manipulator. There's a moment, quiet and heavy, when you realize the relationship isn't really about you. It never was. You've been present, attentive, compassionate. You've explained, apologized, adjusted. You've walked on eggshells, swallowed your needs, and told yourself, maybe next time they'll understand me. But they don't, because they're not listening to understand. They are listening to control. This is what it feels like to deal with an emotional manipulator. Not the kind that yells or storms out, but the kind that twists things gently, subtly. They don't argue, they redirect. You say how you feel, and somehow you end up apologizing. You bring up a pattern, and suddenly they are the victim. They cry at the right moment, go silent when you need clarity, and always leave you questioning your own memory, your own words, your own worth. It starts small. They withdraw when you express frustration. They blame you for their reactions. They say things like, you're too much. You're overreacting. I can't do anything right, can I? So you soften your tone, shrink your needs, and start trying harder to make them feel safe while slowly becoming unsafe in your own heart. You may think they're just sensitive. They've been through a lot, and maybe they have, but trauma is not a permission slip to manipulate others, and your empathy should never become their weapon, because that's exactly what emotional manipulators do. They use your kindness against you. The more you care, the more they control. The more you give, the more they take, and the more you try to fix things, the more broken you feel. You're not crazy, you're not dramatic, you're not unstable, you're just finally starting to notice the imbalance. Here's how you know you feel guilty for setting boundaries. You dread simple conversations. You walk away from interactions feeling foggy, drained, or ashamed. You second-guess your feelings before you even speak them. And worst of all, you've started to believe that your needs are a burden. That's not love, that's emotional captivity. So how do you reclaim yourself? You stop engaging in the emotional gymnastics. You stop trying to explain truth to someone who rewrites every sentence. You stop justifying your peace, your needs, your growth. And most of all, you stop mistaking their silence for depth or their tears for accountability. Because people who manipulate don't want repair. They want control. And if you stay too long, you'll begin to bend in ways that change your shape. You'll lose the sound of your own voice beneath the noise of trying to keep them calm. Let that be the turning point. Let this be the moment you take back your energy, not in anger, but in clarity. Emotional manipulators thrive on confusion. Your clarity is their collapse, so speak simply. Set firm, quiet boundaries, and when they accuse you of being cold, remind yourself protecting your peace is not cruelty, it's maturity. You don't have to yell, you don't have to plead, you just have to stop explaining yourself to someone who's committed to misunderstanding you. This doesn't mean you stop loving them. It means you start loving yourself more, you allow space. You stop offering unearned access to your heart, and you trust that the people who are meant to be in your life will never make you feel like your emotions are weapons. They'll listen, they'll grow, they'll stay without needing you to fall apart first. The truth is, most emotional manipulators only change when they lose the comfort of someone who always showed up no matter how they behaved. And that's what you've been, available, loyal, constant. But now you get to be discerning, because love isn't real unless it includes respect. And relationships aren't safe unless both people are allowed to exist fully, without guilt, without shame, without bending to stay connected. So if you've been carrying a relationship that runs on your silence, your sacrifice, and your self-doubt, lay it down. Step out of the pattern, and remember who you were before you started editing yourself for someone else's comfort. You are not a fixer. You are not an emotional crutch. You are not the mirror someone uses to avoid looking at their own reflection. You are allowed to be whole. And from this moment forward, you walk like it. Final, if you've made it this far, quietly listening, gently reflecting, then I want to say something simple but true. You are growing, not in ways that shout, not in ways the world always sees, but in the quiet decision to protect your peace, to choose silence over struggle, to let go of arguments that never brought you closer, only smaller. Because here's the heart of it. We're not here to convince people of our worth. We're not here to win every debate. We're not here to keep carrying relationships that ask us to disappear just to maintain them. What we are here to do, especially in this season of life, is live wisely, speak clearly, love deeply, and most of all, choose peace on purpose. You've just walked through 9 kinds of people, each one a mirror. A reminder of how much energy we've spent trying to be heard by people who never truly listened. How much joy we've put on hold just to avoid a reaction. And how much of ourselves we've handed over in the name of harmony, only to find it was never real. But now you see it, and once you see it, you don't go back. So if today stirred something in you, if it helped name what you've been feeling, if it reminded you that your peace isn't selfish, it's sacred, then I hope you carry that knowing forward, quietly, boldly, fully. You deserve connection, not confusion, depth, not drama. And above all, you deserve to feel like you in every room you enter. Thank you for being here, for giving your time, your attention, and your heart to this space. If this message stayed with you, I'd love to know. Leave a thought, a line, a truth you're holding onto in the comments below. You never know who might need to hear it too. And until next time, may you walk gently, speak truthfully, and protect your peace like the treasure it is. We'll meet again on this path of choosing calm over chaos and truth over noise. Always.